Who's afraid of Virginia Woolf? Virginia Woolf, Virginia Woolf. Who's afraid of Virginia?
It's easy to talk about Warner Brothers' new motion picture, Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf? It's hard to tell about it. Easy to talk about. All you have to say is Elizabeth Taylor, Richard Burton.
Who's afraid of Virginia?
He's the associate professor of history. She's his wife. The essence of Ivy League charm to students and friends who don't know them well. George Segal, Sandy Dennis are the newcomers led by their charming host and hostess to the hell that hides behind those ivy-clad university walls.
Who's afraid of Virginia Woolf? Early in the morning. Who's afraid of Virginia Woolf? Virginia Woolf, Virginia Woolf. Who's afraid of Virginia Woolf?
Edward Albee wrote the play, the most acclaimed work by this controversial author. Ernest Lehman wrote the screenplay. He did the same for West Side Story and Sound of Music. Mike Nichols directs. His unbroken series of theatrical triumphs have given him a position without peer or rival. All you have to say is Elizabeth Taylor, Richard Burton, George Segal, Sandy Dennis, Edward Albee's Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. After that, all you can say is incredible.
A performance belongs to an actor. You cannot cause anybody, truly, you can't cause anybody to do what they can't do. What Elizabeth does is hers, and she's responsible for it. What I did, I think, is to serve it well, because, you know, you do many takes in a movie, and then you have literally thousands of decisions to make. Which moment do you use? And I think I saw it very much the way Elizabeth saw it, so that I chose to use the particular takes, the angles, the shots in which she found the thing that was most right. So we did it together. It's the way an actress and a director work. I used to arrive on the lot, you know, because I'm very sleepy in the morning, and I would try to wake myself up, and I would say, "Wake up, you're directing a picture with the Burtons," and nothing would happen. But what I was eventually overwhelmed by was the job they did, their professionality, and Elizabeth has a very strange thing, which is that when you see her do something, you know, you're standing next to the camera, and you say, "Well, that's good." And then the next day you see it on the film, and it's 10 times better. Like something happened. She really knows something about movies that many people don't know. Something happens to it in that developing bath. I was born in Berlin, Germany, and my father was Russian. My mother is German. And then we came over here because it was necessary in '39 when I was 6. And then we settled in New York. And I went to school, and I went to college in Chicago, and here I am. I don't holler. You know, I have maybe once or twice. You holler, there are people who like to be hollered at, as you begin to discover after a long time. And so I have hollered a couple of times. But generally, you know, and I don't mean this in any way modest, it's just true. The director is there for other people. If you're doing a play, you're serving the author. If you're doing a picture, you're serving the picture and yourself, but also the actors. The point is to help the actors. And if you can't help them, you're not doing your job. There's no point hollering at them. I fell into directing the way I fell into everything I've ever done, by accident. Somebody said, "You want to direct a play?" I said, "Let's try." Then, the minute I started, I said, "Aha, yes, this is it." And then I realized, sort of looking back, that I had been thinking about it without naming it for years, that really what I'd done with Elaine and in this group we had in Chicago and everything that interested me about the theater was to be thinking about directing, but I didn't know it. I have one goal, really, which is to be a good movie director, because I love making movies, and I would love to know how to do it better and better. And I love the idea of what I feel about movies, which is that if you come into movies, you're really apprenticed to giants, because there are people who've done extraordinary things in movies, I think more practically than in any other field right now.
Here was a 34-year-old unknown director, two actors which were considered to be somewhat miscast, a very kind of daring, emotionally violent film which could not have gone over with the movie going public. So I think it was a real surprise.
The play opened on Broadway on October 1962. It was produced by Richard Barr and Clinton Wilder. It was directed by Alan Schneider, and it starred the great Uta Hagen as Martha, Arthur Hill as George, Melinda Dillon played Honey, and George Grizzard played Nick.
My favorite review said this is a play that should only be seen by dirty-minded women, which, you know, instantly guaranteed the commercial success of the play.
It went on to win 5 Tony Awards: Best Production, the Best Play, the Best Direction, and the Best Male and Female Actor of the Year. It went on to win the Drama Critics Award for the Best Play.
As I was writing the play, I wasn't thinking, gee, I'm writing good roles here for actors. But they turned out to be. I was just writing real people who happened to be articulate and capable of using language to wound and to amuse.
Everybody said at the time, well, they'll never make a movie out of this, you know, it'll be too rough for Hollywood, and too, you know, they'd have to trim back the language, and then they would emasculate the play and all that stuff. So, you know, all credit to Jack Warner. I mean, it's alleged to be that he saw the play on opening night and said, gotta have it and all that stuff.
So in March 1963, he optioned the rights for the play. And when he optioned the rights for the play, he sent a copy of the play to Jeffrey Sherlock. And it came back, and it said that if you want to make a picture of this, you have to get rid of all the profanity and all of the very blunt sexual dialogue.
George?
Yes, love?
Why don't you want to kiss me?
Well, dear, if I kissed you, I'd get all excited. I'd get beside myself, and then I'd have to take you by force right here on the living room rug. And our little guests would walk in, and, well, what would your father say about that?
When it came time to adapt this into a script, Warner's choice was Ernest Lehman.
Well, he'd done a bunch of Hitchcocks, you know, and he was North by Northwest, notably. He's a very witty man. He was on his way to doing Sound of Music.
I was lucky because the producer who wrote the screenplay didn't screw up my text. It was still pretty much there. Though there were cuts, but the film basically represented the play fairly.
What a dump! Huh? What's that from?
I haven't the faintest idea.
Dumbbell.
I had a nice conversation with, I guess it was Jack Warner, the only brother left at the time, and I said, who do you plan to put in it? I'm very interested in this, you know? And he said, I'm buying this film for Bette Davis and James Mason. I so wanted Betty to be in it. And I would have loved to have sat there and watched Bette Davis do an imitation of Bette Davis on purpose.
What a dump!
How wonderful, he remarked in an interview, to see Bette Davis do a parody of herself doing What a Dump, which actually Bette Davis did in the King Vidor film for Warner Brothers, Beyond the Forest, in 1949.
The first actor we'd asked to play George was Henry Fonda, whose agent refused to show him the play. And so Henry didn't get to do it.
Now, Lehman comes on, and Lehman says, I have to pick the director, I have to pick the cast, I have to pick the key craftsmen. In other words, I have to produce. And Jack let him produce. He has a producing credit. This is his first producing credit. He had that much clout in Hollywood. And he said that he wanted Elizabeth Taylor. Now, this flew in the face of what Jack Warner saw the film as when he optioned it and when he bought the rights. Script was sent to Elizabeth. Elizabeth, she's a very real woman. You know, she tells it like it is. She said, this is a stretch. I do not know if I can do this. And her then husband, her fifth husband, Richard Burton, said, whether you can do it or not, it's not the question. You have to do it because nobody else should play Martha. This is a great piece.
I was a little upset by the casting. I understood the commercial reasons behind it. I mean, Elizabeth and Richard were getting married and divorced a lot and yelling at each other a great deal, so I suppose they thought it was perfect casting. Even though Elizabeth was 20 years too young for the role, and Richard was about 5 years too old.
There was a lot of booze going on there. So that always disturbs relationships. You know, they were just catnip to the gossip press. Probably by today's standards, it seems pretty mild, you know? But at the time, it was pretty sensational. I think that, you know, the notion of casting them in this movie as a battling married couple was a clever casting coup. People always like to think that actors are not acting, that they are drawing on something real and authentic in their natural lives to illuminate their work. And whether or not that was true in the case of Virginia Woolf, it seemed to be true to people. So there was a lot of frisson around it, you know.
Martha, I run these flowers because you's... Oh, hell, Martha. Gee.
Pansies, rosemary, violets, my wedding bouquet.
So Elizabeth agrees, and Burton comes aboard, and then the Burtons, Mr. and Mrs., decide that they do not want John Frankenheimer, who has been slated as a director. They want Mike Nichols. Who? Mike Nichols. But Mike Nichols never directed a movie before.
Burton and Taylor had gotten to know Nichols from Broadway because he was doing Nichols and May on Broadway, and Burton was doing Camelot at the same time, and that's how they connected. And actually, Liz Taylor requested Nichols as a director. So, because Ernie Lehman, who was the producer and bought the rights to the play, wanted Liz Taylor, then Liz Taylor wanted Nichols, and I guess they both wanted Burton.
So he comes aboard, and this is spring 1965, and the first thing that happens is he works for 2 months with Ernest Lehman on the script. Well, he went back to the original. You know, it was pretty much back to the original before Mike Nichols came on the scene, but Mike Nichols enforced it even more. And then they worked out about working the play and all that kind of stuff. At this time, the other casting was done. Now, George Segal went in, and Sandy Dennis, who was a stage actress and had appeared in only one film before this time, a Warner Brothers film, Splendor in the Grass. She's on the edges of that film. This is her second film, and when she tested, they were amazed, and she got the role right away.
51-64, take one.
You are always at me when I'm having a good time.
Come on.
I like to dance, and you don't want me to dance.
Honey, come on now, sit down.
Oh. Touch me. Just leave me alone. Just leave me alone.
I do remember the atmosphere on the set, the mood, and the level of professionality of the actors was incredible. The concentration, and you have to credit Mike Nichols, because Mike Nichols' first film, and he understood the story. He developed a relationship with the actors. Directing a film is a specialized profession. It is not just having the actors say the lines. It is very different from doing a play. Of course, the basic thing of doing a play, Mike came on the set doing, and we expect that, working on his relationship with Elizabeth and Richard, and knowing the play well and listening to them. I sat in on the rehearsals, and I could see how much they knew and he knew about things that are not in the play but are inferred in the play.
He's got a gift for what needs to be done to make this play into a movie. And I'm not saying he's not helped enormously by Haskell Wexler. I mean, Again, that's the other thing that comes flying out at you when you see the movie a second time, and that is how good Haskell's photography is.
Being able to be confident with my handheld French camera and to go with Richard down the hall and have him grab the umbrella was good for both of us, Richard and me. I would just say, Richard, just go for it, you know? And I had the camera on my shoulder like this. It's all lit. We just go, which is like nothing today, right? But at that time, the crew said, what the hell's going on? What's he doing, you know? But that was left over from Chicago. The same with Sandy Dennis. If you want to follow somebody around 360, and you want to be able to keep the same focus, you have something which ties the two of you together at exactly 5.5 feet or 6 feet, and then you're able to get the effect of I Dance Like the Wind.
I dance like the wind.
The discussion of whether the film be shot in color or black and white, I was more comfortable in shooting black and white, but my comfort was not the main consideration.
And I discovered the film was being shot in black and white. How bizarre. Why aren't they shooting it in color? And then I was informed that serious films had to be in black and white still, and color films could be musicals and comedies.
The subject matter didn't lend itself for color. Richard Burton and Elizabeth Taylor would look more awful in black and white than in color, so that's another reason.
It was the cuts, it was the framing, it was the close-ups, so that the conditioning of how viewers looked at drama was still that black and white was more visceral and that color was more show-off.
Also, Mike Nichols was not able to suggest these people engulfed in darkness, engulfed in a night, the black night of the soul in color. So black and white.
I think he's got the light great. I think he's got textures great. You know, there's a sequence where George Segal and Burton are out there by the swing. I mean, he's got some light on that swing rope that's fabulous, you know? And he's got some light on the tree bark that's great. And it's not jamming it at you. You just notice it. It's as good, I think, a piece of night shooting as I've ever seen. A lot of the reason the movie's effective is where Nichols is putting his cameras and where they're cutting, and I don't know if that's necessarily following a script or following Mike's instincts and Haskell's instincts, and Sam Osteen, I think, edited.
This was where film is better than stage. A very crucial moment was when Honey says to George,
Now, I didn't know that you had a son.
What?
A son? I hadn't known.
He cuts to the first big close-up of the movie, which is George's head spinning around. Now, if you did that on stage, the moment wouldn't be as powerful. But, you know, sometimes he had to cut in like that, and it was pretty visually startling, but it worked. Well, the biggest challenge was overlapping dialogue because of the nature of the piece, which is this, putting it mildly, contentious couple who are constantly arguing and trying to gain power or command of the moment. And what he just did is he overlapped tracks, a track of one actor maybe playing over the next actor, but it was so tight that it almost seemed like they were overlapping, but it wasn't visually tight, but because he was overlapping the sound, he could make the sound very close. And he did that constantly. And Mike, coming from stage experience, knew that in real life, people overlap, even in normal dialogue.
His mouse, she tooted brandy immodestly and spent half her time in the upchuck.
I know these people.
Do you?
Oh.
But she was a money baggage, amongst other things. Godly money ripped from the golden teeth of the unfaithful, and she was put up with. And she was put up with. Stop her!
Please don't.
Beg, baby.
George!
Nichols also was able to extract a performance from his performers. That's why Elizabeth Elizabeth especially. Burton is a performer. Burton's an actor. Elizabeth, she's a star. That's why Elizabeth wanted Mike Nichols. She knew that he would help direct the performance.
Everybody was a little concerned whether she really had the chops to play this part, beyond the fact that she wasn't old enough. Just, it was such an intense part, and she was known more as a screen beauty and a personality than someone who could play something that she said, I think, had none of herself. It was just a great character. And then there was that very violent scene outside the roadhouse where George throws her against the car. I mean, you can really tell the impact.
Stop it!
Oh, boy. You really are having a field day, aren't you?
But it's the best work she's done in film. And Richard did his usual splendid professional job.
I had always thought of all the movies he did, I think this was the best he ever did. I think it suited him in some ways. He lets you see in that performance the George who was, the George who might have been, the George who has been oppressed by the marriage to the college president's daughter.
Oh, you did?
Everybody knew Richard Burton was a great actor. They were a little concerned that Richard Burton was too strong a personality, but ultimately he is the ringmaster in the play, and so the quiet strength, I think, actually worked.
I mean, all credit to everybody, you know, Mike Nichols, Ernie Lehman, the actors. I mean, they really did make a film version of the play that was an authentic representation of the play as it stood.
The film was very well received by the Academy. Well, the reviews hinted at this, that come Academy Award time, this would be recognized. 13 Academy Award nominations.
The picture was, I think, a substantial success for the studio. You know, there was enough chat about, you know, the raciness of this movie's language and all that stuff, and it had come off of Broadway where there was a lot of talk on the same subject.
I dare say it's a fairly accurate portrayal, I guess, of two people who really do love each other in a relationship, but have allowed things to get in the way of the relationship surviving.
Another reason this is a landmark film was the fact that we had talent in every area of this film working at the top of their form. I mean, how many films can claim that?
When someone like Elizabeth Taylor is giving her all, playing something that she hasn't played before, being a way that she has never done before, seeing Mike Nichols and all the actors dedicated to what they're doing, interested in making a really good film. When we see that as a crew, and then also the crew saw me, who was not sure of myself and wanted to help me, and me appreciating their help, and all that give and take conviviality, when that's there, it also can reflect on the ultimate product. And I think in the case of Virginia Woolf, it did.
I felt very, very fortunate that it was as good as it was, and it's pretty damn good.
You kind of have to break rules sometimes to make something work dramatically and visually, and because they did that, I think it makes it very contemporary.
Well, these are very intelligent people who know the weapons to use in any marital battle. But one thing that a lot of people forget, and it's clear in any good production of the play, is that they enjoy each other's prowess a lot, and they're quite often amused by the terrible things they say to each other.
Why it holds up is it deals with what we do with each other when we're in a long-term relationship. Things we must do with each other to stay alive, to survive, to feel that relationship.
Who's afraid of Virginia Woolf, Virginia Woolf, Virginia Woolf?
I am, George.
Who's afraid of Virginia Woolf?
I am, George. I am.
I'll talk about any goddamn thing I want, you son of a bitch!
You want to dance, Angel Boobs? Screw, baby.
Goddamn you!
When you saw Virginia Woolf, you instinctively knew that these words were going to hit the American public like an angry fist.
Damn right.
Sons of bitches.
Bastard.
Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf drove the heaviest stake into the heart of film censorship.
Christ. Nuts!
Dirty-minded.
Goddamn explosion you've ever heard.
It was a significant way station on the way to some kind of liberalization of the production code of movies. That's its historical significance.
You bastard.
Damn.
Damn it.
Jeez. Snap! Like hell I will.
And they were very nervous about the language.
Up yours.
It was in June of 1966 that Edward Albee's play, which had been a big hit on Broadway, was brought to the screen by Warner Brothers.
Who's afraid of Virginia Woolf?
I had been on the job just a month, no more than a month. Suddenly, I'm confronted now with something that was unique, because what you heard on the screen was language that had never been ever displayed or heard on the screen before.
Well, at that time, Jack Valenti was, relatively new to his job as head of the Motion Picture Association. I think that he understood his job, probably from the moment he took it, that he would have to address all the bubbling controversy about how people spoke and behaved on the screen. That, there needed to be more realistic adult behavior in movies at that point.
Tut, tut, tut.
Tut, tut, tut yourself, you old floozy.
This was a pioneering film in pushing the boundaries. Now, you have to understand, beginning in 1930, for 30 years, the movie industry was ruled by one of my predecessors named Will Hayes, who conceived the Hayes Code, which I counted to be a draconian piece of censorship. But in those days, the major studios owned all the theaters. And if you didn't get a seal of approval from the Hayes office, you literally couldn't find a play date for your films. The perimeters were set, and people knew what they could say and what they couldn't say. So this film was like a burning arrow that's thrown into a haystack. It created a lot of stir.
There was a memo that came from Jeffrey Sherlock, who was head of the production code at this time, and it said quite simply that the play was unfilmable as it was.
A great, big, fat flop!
I thought to stop it, Mother.
I hope that was an empty bottle, George. You can't afford to waste good liquor. Not on your salary, not on an associate professor's salary.
They do say things that are kind of, outrageous, Less so now when you go back to it. I mean, there is a little bit sitting here in 2006, you think, that was bothering people, that phrase. Now, the big difference is, because Albee was a very good writer, there's real wit in those exchanges.
There were hundreds and hundreds of red-penciled words and phrases from Sherlock. I mean, it was a complete evisceration.
So they were under a kind of implicit threat anyway. And when Jack Warner said, well, maybe I'll just take it out unrated, it sent the fear of Beelzebub through the moralistic part of the motion picture industry. What if he did? What if it was a success?
Is that a threat, George, huh?
That's a threat, Martha.
You're gonna get it, baby.
Be careful, Martha. I'll rip you to pieces.
You're not man enough. You haven't the guts.
Now, Sherlock, from the onset, was on to this whole notion of adult film, which was happening in the post-war period. And he was an enlightened man, a very educated man, and he was very sympathetic to films that were made for adults, as he was to this film. So on the one hand, he told, Jack Warner, it will not get a seal. But on the other side of the mouth, he said, you know what to do, Jack? Go to the review board. Try to get them to change our verdict.
There was an appeals board mechanism set up of distributors and exhibitors, and they also upheld Sherlock. And I made it known that I wasn't going to summarily overrule Jeffrey Sherlock and whatever he said and whatever the appeals board did. And we flew out to meet with Jack Warner and his consigliere. That meeting lasted a couple of hours. And when we got done, Jack Warner decided he would take out one phrase called hump the hostess and another phrase called screw you.
When a film that had controversial elements like Virginia Woolf did, the director would shoot both ways. So if they had problems with censors, they could go, they would be already in the can, the film would be already in the can, and they could go with the one that was the clean version. Well, Mike Nichols didn't do any cover shots. Mike Nichols did not want the film tampered with. Screw You, they had them change it to Goddamn You, and they brought another actress in to dub the line.
Yeah, I could see why he might not think that would be as bad as Goddamn You, but he said, how are we going to fit Goddamn? It's so much longer than Screw. So I saw what Sam did. He actually started that shot with her back to the camera. It's a close shot of Martha. By the time she spins her head around and you see her face, all she says is you. She doesn't even say goddamn. So you never, and you is the same.
Goddamn you!
And then Jack Warner agreed that he would put the film out with only adults allowed, which had never happened before. So there was a mollifying effect at that time. The movie went out with adults only. It got a huge amount of publicity.
I said, I warn you.
I'm impressed.
I warned you not to go too far.
I'm just beginning.
And then after that came Blow Up, Antonioni's film, which for about 10 to 15 seconds, for the first time on the screen, you saw nudity, two little teeny boppers cavorting around, mostly with their backside showing. And so that caused another rumple in the public conscience, and the press took that up. So those two films ignited a great deal of debate, and the whole country was in a kind of a ferment. So it was an unusual time in the culture of the country. What it revealed to me was that the past was done. The old ways that we used to guide movies was over. I wasn't quite sure what the future was going to be, the shape and form of that future, but I knew it was going to be different. And for the next year and a half, I began to fool around with various kinds of remedial action.
Valenti had always had the notion that there should be a rating system. I mean, to that degree, and Jack is kind of an old-fashioned Texas liberal guy, you know. He really did believe that there should be a formalization of the phrase different strokes for different folks, you know. And it is one of his proud achievements, is that thing.
And finally, on November 1st, 1968, 2 years after Virginia Woolf, I inaugurated the new movie classification system of G, PG, R, and X.
So that's what you're after, is it? What are we going to have? Blue games for the guests, huh? Everything in its place, Martha. Everything in its own good time.
And the pornographers were saying double X, triple X. They stole the rating, and I changed it from X to NC-17, no children under 17 allowed, which was a kind of a acronym that didn't lend itself to exploitation very well. And that's pretty much what it is now. But that's the genesis of how the rating system came into being. And the ignition for this were these two movies, Virginia Woolf and Blow Up.
All of this because of Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. Again, it drove the heaviest stake in the heart of film censorship.
This, to me, was kind of like what Fort Sumter was to the Civil War. The first shots were fired in South Carolina, and that started the Civil War. Virginia Woolf started the unraveling of the old and the introduction of new ways to let parents know the content of films and to help guide them so they can make their own decisions about what movies they want their children to see or not to see.